Hello, boys, girls, babes. Welcome back to the Janae Talks Caps podcast. As always, thank you all so much for tuning in today. And today we are going to start off talking about the biggest news regarding the biggest pre-playoff elephant in the room, if you will. That is for sure on every Caps fan's mind today. That, of course, being the injury to Caps superstar captain Alex Ovechkin, which if you didn't see the game against the Toronto Maple Leafs on Sunday night, his injury had occurred early during the third period of that game. Now, first of all, let's just get this out of the way right off the bat. That play by the Leafs goaltender, Erik Kallgren, that's a penalty, right? Like any which way that you read that rule in the rule book, that is a penalty. And no, ESPN, you with your truly terrible hockey coverage, the Leafs goaltender doesn't have to, quote, mean to do it in order for it to be a penalty. It is a penalty. It wasn't called, which had the Caps obviously pretty pissed off, as Ovechkin was forced to obviously leave the game due to the injury. So even Ovi, who, like, you almost never see that guy complaining to the refs, right? He angrily chucked his helmet at the wall as he was on his way down the tunnel to the Caps locker room. Again, not to return due to the injury that occurred on the play. So he was pissed. The Caps were pissed. And to be clear, like, I'm not saying that because the guy is injured on the play that you have to call a penalty. That's not what I'm saying at all. I actually don't think that injuries should play a factor in whether or not something is called a penalty. Like, if it's a penalty, then it's a penalty. That's it. Doesn't matter if the guy's injured or if he's fine. That's my opinion. That's the way that I have always thought that things, should be called or not called. I don't think that injuries should play a factor at all. Like I said, if it's a penalty, then it's a penalty. It doesn't matter if the guy's injured or not. If it's not a penalty, then it's not a penalty. Again, doesn't matter if the guy's injured or not, right? So, but this play here, regardless of whether Ovechkin was injured or not, that is a penalty. It just is. Read the rule book, refs. Like, it doesn't matter if you think the goalie meant to trip the guy or not. He tripped him. End of story. That's it. So anyways, the Caps used their anger in the right way. They scored 2 quick goals to take a 3-1 lead over the Leafs after Ovechkin had exited the game. So just wanted to quickly touch on, it was 1 goal by Lars Eller, and the next goal was by Marcus Johansson. So both of those guys, I just wanted to bring it up because both of those guys, have really been heating up of late for the Caps, which you love to see right as we're headed toward the Stanley Cup playoffs here. So that secondary scoring, that depth scoring is going to be really important. So those are 2 guys in Lars Eller and Marcus Johansson who you love to see getting hot at the right time here. But yeah, I mean, like, I don't think too many people, honestly, were really too concerned at all with how this one game was going to turn out. We were all concerned, just primarily about Alex Ovechkin, right? Like, his status as we do head toward the playoffs, because the playoffs, they're just only about a week away now. So it's about the worst possible timing for a guy to get injured, unfortunately. And not just a guy, but like your 50 goal scoring MVP candidate captain, who is still one of the very best players in the entire league, even at age 36. You can't afford to lose them. So really all that you're trying to do at this stage of the regular season is just to not have anybody get injured. So this game, it was basically a disaster for the Caps, like I said, on a rather cheap play by the Leafs goaltender, Erik Kallgren. So he said after the game that he didn't mean to do it. I kind of think that's bullshit. But again, that's subjective, like, it's up for debate. I just think that, like, I'm a goalie myself, right? And there was really no reason on that play that you have your stick in the guy's legs. Like, he wasn't going for a poke check. Ovechkin the puck was rolling. He'd already lost the puck. The puck was already in the corner. It just seemed to me that, and Ovechkin never entered the crease as well. So it just seemed to me that it was kind of the goalie. Like I said, the puck was already all the way over in the corner. It just kind of seemed to me that it was more so the goalie kind of trying to slow Ovechkin down as he's on his way to retrieve that puck in the corner, kind of trying to give his defenseman a little bit more time to get back. But again, subjective. people can see these things different ways, but it was a trip, right? So it should have at least been a 2-minute penalty. It wasn't, and now we wait to see. So like I said, that play, basically a disaster for the Caps. It made the whole Sunday night, just a big dark cloud over everything. But could it be disaster averted, possibly? So I'm going to break down for you here everything that we know about Ovechkin's injury so far. So during the game, just after he went crashing into the boards, he was able to get himself up and head off of the ice under his own power, which is always a good sign. You always want to see that for sure. And then when you watch the replay of the sequence where he's heading off the ice, there's one very important thing that I want you guys to focus on, which is he starts doing circles with that left arm, the one that he injured. So he's trying to stretch it out, flex it out after just having barreled into the boards with it. So the reason why that's a very good sign, that he's doing that he's kind of making those arm circles there with that left arm. The reason why that's a good sign is because I can tell you, as someone who's had a great many sports injuries of my own over the years, whether it be from hockey, baseball, basketball, but I can tell you that you would absolutely not be circling your arm around like that, making those circles with your arm, if it were something very serious, like a tear, like a dislocated shoulder, like a broken collarbone, anything like that. You would not be waving your arm around in circles like that, that's for sure. So, your arm would kind of just be hanging there. So we saw that with Anthony Mantha earlier this season, right? When he had his big shoulder injury that required surgery, he could not move his arm. His arm was just hanging there. So the fact that Ovechkin there, he's, like I said, he's putting his arm in circles, flexing it out, stretching it out, it's a good sign. I saw people comparing Ovechkin's crash into the boards with the crash into the boards that Connor McDavid had when he broke his collarbone. And yeah, while the crashes themselves are very similar when you watch them, the way that the player is behaving afterwards is not similar. So that's a good thing. It was a very good sign, like I said, that he was moving his arm around, that he was even able to do that. And then after the game, we didn't get much of an update from head coach Peter Laviolette, just basically that he hadn't yet had a chance to talk with the trainers, and that they would, get an evaluation on Ovi, and then see where he's at, basically, and go from there. So, but TJ Oshie, he did offer a bit of an update in his post-game presser, saying that Ovechkin is the toughest guy he's ever met, and that if anyone wasn't going to miss a lot of time from a crash like that, it would be Alex Ovechkin. So Oshie's his probably his most telling comment was that he told reporters that he had spoken to Ovechkin after the game, after the game had ended, and that he thinks, just based on his conversation with Ovi, he thinks that Ovechkin is going to be fine. So that's a very good sign again. And then today, the day after the crash, the Caps didn't practice. So obviously we can't take anything from that, whether or not he was at practice or not, because they didn't hold a practice. But they did have their annual team photo scheduled, and they went ahead with that, and Ovechkin was there. And he was dressed in full gear for the photo, which might not seem like a big deal, but it is a big deal, because if your shoulder or your arm or anything there is really badly hurt, then you aren't pulling a hockey jersey over your head, that's for sure. But he was there, no cast, no sling, and like I said, dressed in full equipment. So very good sign. He was all smiles as well, as he usually is, and just generally seemed to be in a good mood, was what was being reported. So not like someone who just had a season-ending injury and is going to miss the playoffs. So those are all very good signs. There was also a moment that was filmed just before the team photo took place this morning, where Ovechkin was joking around with Caps owner Ted Leonsis, and Ovi was cracking jokes and making people laugh, and Leonsis jokingly goes, he's like, "Oh yeah, I can see you're very injured there, Ovi, you faker." So just because Ovi was just out there doing Ovi things, kind of being the life of the party and making everybody laugh. So that was just just a little soundbite that is probably a very good sign as well, as you have to think that, if Ovi was severely injured, the Caps owner, who loves him and loves to see his team win as well, he wouldn't be joking around and laughing about it. He'd probably be crying into his pillow like the rest of us. So, and then Ovi proceeded to then help Ted Leonsis skid across the ice for the team photo. So, all in all, he looked pretty okay. It was pretty normal. So, all good signs, I would say, from the practice facility today, just one day after Ovi's scary crash into the boards at Capital One Arena. So, and then finally today, the Caps released an official update on their captain as well. So they have officially listed him as being out day to day, with an upper body injury. So day to day, which is a hell of a lot better than week to week or out indefinitely, the dreaded out indefinitely, that no one wants to see. So, or, any of those other updates that we had all been fearing for the last 12 to 14 hours or so. So day to day, it's about as good as we could probably hope for. So the fact that the Caps issue that official update now as well, they're doing it the next day after having no official update immediately following the game. That tells me what I probably take from that. That tells me that they most likely sent Ovechkin for an MRI, and that MRI probably showed no concerning damage, and so thus he's day to day instead of, like I said, week to week or worse. So if there's no structural damage that's of any concern, then it'll just be about inflammation subsiding, stiffness subsiding to the point where he feels good enough that he's able to play. So I'd probably just let him rest for this last part of the regular season here if it were me, but we'll see. I'm not the coach. So but yeah, as of right now, it sure seems like the Caps just barely dodged an absolutely huge bullet right before the playoffs. If Ovi's out, you might as well not even show up for the playoffs, right? Honestly, he's the one guy that you really cannot afford to lose. He scores too many goals for this team, and as we all know, goals win hockey games. So, like I said, we know that is the news that everyone cared the most about today. That's what everyone wanted to hear about first, because as I said, if Ovi's out injured, then probably nothing else even matters, right? We can just fold it up for the season. But for now, at least, it doesn't appear that is going to be the case. So we turn our attention in that case towards the upcoming playoffs, where the Caps still have 3 different opponents that they could potentially face in the first round. Those 3 being the Florida Panthers, the New York Rangers, and the Carolina Hurricanes. So, as Caps fans, who do we think we want to see in the first round? Well, that is always kind of a rather dangerous game to play, if you ask me, as you might think that you want to see a certain team, but then you end up losing to that team, or likewise, you might think that you want to avoid a certain team when in reality, your team might play very well against that team and you might end up beating that team. So we're largely going to avoid, on this podcast anyway, hoping for any certain one team. But we will break down a little bit here who the best matchup might theoretically be. So Florida Panthers, New York Rangers, Carolina Hurricanes. The Florida Panthers are, by definition, a total wagon right now, having won a franchise record 13 straight games before they just finally lost a game to the Tampa Bay Lightning just the other day. They score a lot of goals, but they also give up a lot of goals, and they definitely have questions in net in terms of especially Sergei Bobrovsky's play in the playoffs in particular. So, we talked about it in depth on last week's episode, but he's a great regular season goalie, typically. Not so great at all when it comes to the playoffs. So the Caps have shown, they've proven time and time again that they can defend rush teams like the Panthers very well when they stick to their team defense consistently. We saw it most recently against the Toronto Maple Leafs, where the Caps largely shut them down for the majority of that game. They didn't give Toronto anything for the first 53 minutes of that game. The Caps' fourth line of Nick Dowd, Garnet Hathaway, and Johan Larsson completely shut down the Leafs' top line featuring Austin Matthews and Mitch Marner. Matthews and Marner, they spent the entirety of that game chasing the puck, chasing Capitals players around in the Leafs' defensive zone because that Caps' fourth line, they had them hemmed in their own zone for the entire game. So that is perfect. But like we talked about, that's why I say that it has to be sticking to that team defense consistently, because the Caps, they kind of went to sleep, right? Made a couple of gaffes in the last 7 minutes or so of that game. The Leafs got a lucky bounce off of the end boards as well. But suddenly you look up and it's the 3-3 game. So, but for 53 minutes, I want to focus on those 53 minutes instead. We want to look on the bright side, is that they once again played great team defense. All 5 guys on the ice are committed to, involved in the team defense, involved in disrupting plays, in pressuring, in causing turnovers, in blocking shots, etc., etc., etc. And it worked. Again, it worked in Colorado. That's another recent example. And the Caps did it for the full 60 minutes in that game against the Avalanche. And because they did it for the full 60 minutes, they completely shut down one of the league's top offenses, and they became the first Eastern Conference team to win a game in regulation in Denver this season. So you can see that the Caps, they have that ability where they can shut down top offenses. They can really frustrate top offensive players. We saw it, with Nathan MacKinnon in Colorado. We saw it again the other night with Austin Matthews and Mitch Marner. And really, the Caps' fourth line is a complete thorn in the side of these top offensive guys for opposition teams, like Nick Dowd, Garnet Hathaway, and whether it's been Johan Larsson now or Carl Hagelin before he got injured. These guys are just a pain in the ass for the other team. They really are. Like, nobody wants to play against these guys. They're in your face. They shut you down. They make you play in your own end all night long. So while I obviously really like the Caps group of 6 defensemen, I think their top 6 defensemen are as good as any group of 6 in the league. Really good group of 6. But I think that the Caps forwards as well are just as important, helping out on defense. And when they play that way, when they have all 5 guys committed to doing it, as we've seen over the last month or so here, as they get ready, get ramped up for the playoffs, you can see, like, it's really good hockey. It's really frustrating to the other team. And I truly believe that the Caps, have that confidence within themselves that they can shut anyone down. So for that reason, and certainly, like I talked about with Sergei Bobrovsky and Ned as well, that's why I don't think that the Panthers are as bad of a matchup for the Caps as everyone seems to think that they are. Because don't forget too, like, the Caps, they can score too. They're no slouch in that department for sure. So this Capitals team scores a lot of goals as well. And they've never had trouble beating Sergei Bobrovsky, whether it's in the regular season or in the playoffs. They've never had a problem beating him. So I'd have to think that would be in Bob's head a little bit as well. And so maybe that's not such a bad matchup for the Caps. Everybody this season kind of fears the Panthers. But for the Caps, I think maybe you don't have to fear them that much. And onto the New York Rangers. We'll do them next. And listen, like, of the 4 teams that we're talking about here, the 3 possible playoff opponents for the Caps and the Caps themselves. So when you look at the Panthers, the Hurricanes, the Rangers, and the Caps, the New York Rangers are pretty clearly, analytically at least, like, they're pretty clearly the weakest of the 4 teams in that bunch, top to bottom. But the one area where they are certainly not weaker is in goal. And you know me, like, I'm a goalie myself. I will always say, because it's true, that goaltender is the most important position. And that's why the Rangers scare me almost more than any other team, because they have the goaltender. Like I said, analytically, the Rangers are the weakest team. They're the weakest on offense, where they rely a lot on their power play to generate goals for them. They don't generate a ton at 5-on-5 at all, which is usually hopefully, where most of the minutes in the playoffs will be played, is at 5-on-5. And they're the weakest on defense in terms of giving up shots, giving up chances. So can't even talk today. Analytically speaking, they are the weakest team of the four, by far. It's not close. But they also have the best goalie of the four. By far, it's not close. And he's actually been the best goalie in the entire league this season. Again, by far, it's not close. So for me, like, this matchup would be pretty simple. If you can get to goaltender Igor Shesterkin and make him look like he's at least part human, then you're going to win this series pretty easily. But if he continues in the playoffs doing what he's been able to do pretty consistently all regular season long, then you're going to run into some trouble. For my money, if I got a vote in the matter, which I don't, but if I did get a vote, this guy would be the Hart Trophy winner as the league MVP this season. Like, he's been that good. It's stupid that they never seem to want to give that award to the goalies, the Hart Trophy, that is, unless, that goalie is Canadian, playing in Canada for Canada's most historic team, Carey Price, Montreal Canadiens, 2015. But come on, like, the goalie is a member of the team, right? Like, he can totally be the most valuable player on that team, and therefore he can totally be the most valuable player in the league. So the fact that they seem to just want to kind of dish it out every year to the forward who has the most points, it's dumb. And the argument has always been that, that's because the goalies already have the Vezina trophy, right? Well, the forwards already have the Art Ross trophy for most points, no? Like, how is that any different? So anyways, that's my rant, the rant of a goalie on behalf of my fellow goalies. But Igor Shesterkin, he would absolutely be my pick for the Hart Trophy. He's been incredible. So anyways, moving on. Okay, so the Carolina Hurricanes, good team, obviously. But in my mind, not a particularly scary team for the Caps specifically. The Caps have had pretty good success against them as a whole this season, and even going back the last few seasons. So I think that the Caps match up against them pretty well. They've shown that, like I said, in a lot of games over the last few seasons. And they kind of try to play the same, the Hurricanes, that is, they kind of try to play the same physical in-your-face style that the Caps play. But the Caps, in my opinion anyway, can do it better than the Canes can, and would win that battle. So the Caps, they're just, like, they're bigger, they're stronger than the Canes are. And so if it's a head-to-head matchup of a similar style of play between the two teams, then I would be picking the Caps if that's the way that Carolina wants to try to play it. So, and again, goalie questions for the Canes, right? Like, we talked about it a lot on last week's episode, but the Canes have injury concerns in net right now, with both Frederik Andersen and now Antti Ranta as well, missing time. And even when their goaltenders are healthy, you still have concerns in the net in the playoffs for this team. Like I said, we talked about it a lot on last week's episode. So if you want to hear a more kind of in-depth analysis about the goaltending in the Eastern Conference, hit up last week's episode. But, like, Freddie Andersen in the playoffs, yikes, right? Like, he's far from a closer. I'll just say that, and we will leave it at that. But yeah, like, there you have it, right? Those are your three options for who the Caps could face in the first round of the playoffs this season. And the Caps control at least part of their own destiny here, in that they control right now whether or not they're going to move up in the standings and grab that third spot in the Metropolitan Division over the Pittsburgh Penguins. Obviously the Caps, they got a point in the game against the Toronto Maple Leafs, losing the game ultimately in a shootout. But we did get the 1 point. Pittsburgh, the same day, they lost by a 4-1 score to the Philadelphia Flyers, which was kind of crazy, kind of unbelievable. Although I had a feeling, I had said to my friend that I had a feeling, the Flyers, they're such a terrible team, right? But, like, I kind of had a feeling that just because they hate the Penguins so much, like, there's that rivalry there, just like there is with the Caps and the Penguins, because the Flyers hate the Penguins so much, I kind of had a feeling that maybe, just maybe, Philly could pull out this win just to take 2 points away from the Penguins just because they want to screw them over, right? And that's what happened. So great job, Flyers. Thank you very much. The Caps now control their own destiny in terms of third place in the Metropolitan Division. They're 1 point behind the Penguins currently, but the Caps have a game in hand. So if they win that game in hand, obviously that's 2 points in the standings. So we know that the Florida Panthers have already locked up first place in the Eastern Conference. So whoever the second wild card in the East is, that's who you're going to be facing. But if the Caps do move up to third in the Metro, and again, like as of right now, they have full control of whether or not they do that. But if they do move up to third in the Metro, we still wouldn't quite be able to tell you who they would be facing because we don't know quite yet who is going to win the Metropolitan Division and who's going to finish as the number 2 seed in the Metropolitan. So the Carolina Hurricanes and the New York Rangers, they're still trying to figure that one out between the two of them. But again, that's why we said that the Caps have partial control of their own destiny here. Because they can control whether or not they move up to third in the Metro, which means they can control whether or not they avoid the Florida Panthers in the first round of the playoffs, basically, is what that's about. So, but they wouldn't have any control, like I said, over who they would face as that third seed in the Metro, because at this point, like I said, it could be either of the New York Rangers or the Carolina Hurricanes. We don't know yet, so we would have to wait and see on that. There's also still a chance as well that the Caps could finish as the first wild card in the East rather than as the second wild card, which in that case, they'd get the winner of the Metropolitan Division in the first round of the playoffs, which again, that could still be either of the Carolina Hurricanes or the New York Rangers. So it doesn't really matter. You just control what you can control, and then you just wait to see how the rest of it shakes out. Basically, that's it. So I honestly don't know that I even have a preference of opponent for round one. I'm always kind of the mind that, like, if you're going to get to where you ultimately want to be, you're going to have to beat most of them at some point anyway. So who cares, right? We do know that the Caps will officially be starting the postseason on the road, which for most teams, most teams don't like that. But as we all know, we are not most teams. And starting on the road for the Caps is great, right? Like, this Caps team obviously is really, really good on the road. They have the best road record in the entire NHL this season. They have the best road record in the entire NHL over the last few seasons. And they're just very, very comfortable playing on the road, and they win an awful lot of hockey games on the road. So for the Caps, that is a great place to start. I definitely did not want them to move up enough that they would get home ice in the first round. Stick to the road, boys. Anyways, that's all we have for you today, folks. As always, thank you all so much for listening today. It's great to have you all with us. Our listenership has been going way up, skyrocketing basically. And we're very excited about it. So thank you all so much, really, from the bottom of our hearts, for being here, for tuning in, for listening so loyally, and for sharing us around with your family, your friends, your fellow Caps fans, your fellow hockey fans in general. And hey, if you're new here, don't forget to subscribe to our podcast if you like what you've heard. We are available on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, on Google Podcasts, on iHeartRadio, on Stitcher, on TuneIn, on Deezer, on Podcast Addict. So basically anywhere and everywhere that you get your podcast from. I could list them all, but basically anywhere and everywhere that you would get your podcast from, we are on there. So subscribe, share us around, leave us your comments and or your questions for next week's episode. And until next time, Caps fans, keep having fun, stay classy, pray for Ovechkin's shoulder, and let's go Caps.